I can say that I shook Lanello's hand. I can say that I knew him as a man. Yes, I walked the earth beside him, never knowing that he'd leave, oh so soon, that this great man would ascend. Oh, we called him many things upon the earth. His name was Mark, it was given him at birth. He was Shri to those he taught, and for the poetry he brought, he would pen Lanello as his signature. He was a prophet, 'twas his mission and his name, and those whose lives he touched will never be the same. You could tell that he was purity, and you could read the truth in the holy words he spoke in God's name. He was a shepherd and so proud of his sheep, and he gave them portions of the flame to keep. He bestowed upon his children an awareness of their Christ self, and I thank the Lord Mark Prophet touched me. He was a prophet, 'twas his mission and his name, and those whose lives he touched will never be the same. You could tell that he was purity, and you could read the truth in the holy words he spoke in God's name. He was so gentle he could soothe a baby child, yet God gave him power to make the storm run wild. Not a greater man you'll see more than once in a century. He's not gone, Mark is with us all the while. He was a prophet, 'twas his mission and his name, and those whose lives he touched will never be the same. You could tell that he was purity, and you could read the truth in the holy words he spoke in God's name. He was a prophet, 'twas his mission and his name, and those whose lives he touched will never be the same. You could tell that he was purity, and you could read the truth in the holy words he spoke in God's name. Well, with that song, ladies and gentlemen, that becomes a little bit of my, my testimony to exactly how I got on the path of initiation, how I met Mark, and how I met Mother, and how I met the teachings, and it kind of sums it up in a way. It goes back to Colorado Springs in 1972. Actually, I was entertaining. I was on the road, performing in the nightclubs, and just picking and grinning for my my 8-hour pay. Actually, it was 4 hours. It's 4 hours a night, 6 nights a week, year in and year out. And I've been doing that since about 1961. I started entertaining in Kansas City at the age of 20. And so in about 1971, I kind of went on a diet. I was over in Davenport, Iowa, and I was getting interested in health food and vitamins and all that kind of thing. And so when we got a booking, our next booking was going to be in Colorado Springs right after that. First thing for me to do, of course, was to go out and hit the streets and try and find a health food store where I could, get some more vitamins and stuff. So I'm wandering around the streets of Colorado Springs looking for a health food store, and I wandered into one actually, and it just, something about it just didn't feel right. So I kept wandering, and ended up walking into a place called the Four Winds Organic Center. Here's this great big sign and this cornucopia in the window and all this neat stuff, and I walk in and there's this classical music playing. There's a violet ceiling, and it's just a beautiful place. And so I thought, well, hey, this feels like the right place. And so I walked on in, and I could see clearly that they had vitamins and health food. And one thing and another. Well, I don't know that it was necessarily the very first time that I walked in, but I got to where I was, frequenting this little health food store quite a bit during my stay there. And it was either the first day I went in or it was shortly thereafter that I was sitting at the juice bar. They had a little juice bar, and I was sitting up at the juice bar having either my breakfast or my lunch or my dinner. I would spend an hour and a half there each time, 3 times a day. I mean, I was spending my life in the Four Winds Organic Center. So I'm sitting there at the counter, and all of a sudden, on these great big huge cast iron chairs that they have, these seats, these counter seats, and this fellow sidles up next to me and looks me straight in the eye and says, well, he says, how do you like the place? I says, it's real nice. He was sitting over here to my left. I said, I really like it. I mean, it's nice. It's got a lot of neat stuff here and everything. Well, when I looked at this man, I said to myself, this fellow looks very, very familiar. And I thought, I probably saw him in the nightclub, And well, come to find out, it's Mark Prophet, and I probably didn't see him in the nightclub unless he was out rescuing somebody. That was my first introduction to Mark Prophet. He just sat down next to me and just like an old friend said, well, how do you like the place? So I did. I loved the place, and that's where it all started. That's where I began to get all the information that I needed to really get me on the path and keep me on the path. Eventually, one day I went to a Sunday service, and Mark Prophet was giving the service. It was a replay of what they did back then was at La Tourelle, was they would replay for the public in the evening the dictation that had come through the messenger in the morning for the staff. And so this was a replay of Jesus taken by Mark early in the morning. And so that was my very first dictation. Mark had a way of, after the service, he would always stand at the door that exited the little chapel there. It was the White Chapel. They had a White Chapel, and then they also had a library, a darker area, which was a part of a chapel later. But this was in the White Chapel. And Mark would always stand at the door and greet people as they left. So when I walked through the door and shook his hand, he said, well, Terry Kennedy, it's good to see you. And of course, he remembered me from down at the store, but he remembered my name, and I was absolutely flabbergasted that he would be able to call me by my first name. So I was pretty impressed. We had tea and cookies out there in the kind of the outer area, and then we would go into the family room, and Mark would sit down on this beautiful violet chair and just let people ask questions, and it was standing room only. I mean, people would just cram in there and sit on the chairs and the floor and stand up, and what Mark was doing was really ministering to the people. Now, there was something about Mark Prophet that I could not really explain to people. I mean, I wanted to be able to tell my friends and my relatives and everything, hey, I met this most amazing man. And it was actually pretty hard to do because my own inner feelings were difficult to kind of convey to people, because my feelings were, and I knew that I had met one of the most balanced people ever in my life. And here was this man that I came to find out later actually had a very balanced threefold flame within his heart, and that's the perfect love, wisdom, and power. And this man was so amazing. Mark was just as common as I don't mean to sound silly when I say it, but he was as common as an old shoe, I mean, he was exactly what you needed when you needed it. He was the common man's minister. Yet, I mean, and I had no idea it was the messenger for the Great White Brotherhood. I mean, I wouldn't have understood that had he told me that. So to me and for me, he was everything that I needed in the health food store right on the street where I needed it. And so I didn't really get drawn into the church until after Mark ascended. And I got this notice in the mail that said they were celebrating Mark's ascension service. 1973 in February 26th, Mark ascended. And I believe those dates are correct. And so I got this thing in the mail. I was on the mailing list, and I couldn't believe what had happened, that Mark had passed on. So I called Kathleen down at the Four Winds Organic Center, and I said, Kathleen, this can't be happening. Mark can't die. She said, Mark didn't die. Mark ascended. It's a great day. And she says, not only that, his son Sean, who was 8 years old, just fixed pancakes for everybody over at La Tourelle. I thought, well, now, isn't that a different way of looking at things? And so from that moment on, I had a whole new slant on what life's all about. And so I got into the celebration, and of course that was my first probably real awakening as to just what the Ascension was all about. I used to carry a little kind of a pad around in my pocket, and I would keep my expenses on one side, and then when I had something to write down, I'd turn it over, and when the paper met in the middle of this little spiral thing, well, I knew I was out and I needed a new one. So Mark wanted to demonstrate something. He was talking about why you need to take a colonic and get yourself, all cleaned up on the other end and from the inside out. And so he's drawing this spiral, for me on this little thing. And I've got this thing somewhere. And so we were chatting, and mother and the family pulled up in the Citron outside, and he said, "Come here, I'd like for you to meet my family." So we went outside, and Mother pulls up. Mother gets out of the car. She's got Tatiana in her hands. Tatiana's a little baby, and she's wearing this little kerchief, sort of a head thing. She probably just washed her hair, and she's got this little kerchief on, and just looks like somebody's housewife, And Gilbert Hemmeter, I believe, was driving him, and all the rest of the family was in the car. And he took me around and he introduced me to all of them. Well, it was a very sweet thing for Mark to have done, because little did I know, at some future point, I would be very involved with Mother. And as it turns out, Mother took me into, I'd say she took me into her heart almost like a brother. At one point, she did tell me she never had a brother, and we were fairly close in age, and so she shared that with me. She said, she thought of me as a kind of a brother. And I've always carried that in my heart, and that's a very sweet thing for her to have said to me. So I got pretty involved with Mother after Mark made his ascension, because I just knew it was the next place to go. I and my Father are one. I and my Mother are one. Twin flames within, so I can begin to show. I and my Father are one. I am the light of the world. God in you is the light of the world. Christ said, all these things I do, you shall do and more. I and my Father are one. I and my Mother are one. Twin flames within, so I can begin to show. I and my Father are one. Twin flames within, so I can begin to show. I and my Father are one. Now that song actually was, I think, the first song I ever wrote for as a sort of an Ascended Master song, if you will. And I wrote that on the way to Atlanta. There was an Atlanta class that was held right after the class of Freedom 73, the Land of Lanello. So the Land of Lanello was the very first formal class that I went to, but I didn't go to the dictation portion of it. I only went to the survival portion of it. And I'll never forget, when I got there, Roy Johnson was manning the food tent, or the food building, and he saw me and he says, "Where you been?" And I said, "Well, I've been on the road entertaining, He said, "Well, you missed everything. You missed all the good stuff." And of course, I didn't know really what I'd missed, because I didn't know what a conference was. I knew Mark Prophet from the Four Winds Organic Center. I knew Mother as his wife, and I was just kind of getting to know everyone. But anyway, the freedom or the survival portion of that class was just excellent. So I was able to attend it in the morning and entertain in the evening at Colorado Springs, because the land of Lanello was about 29 miles east of Colorado Springs. And so what happened after the Freedom class, Freedom 73, was the masters asked Mother to go to Atlanta and hold a little seminar, weekend seminar. Mother put me up with, I didn't have a place to stay, so she plugged me into Tom Miller's room, and I slept there on the floor in my sleeping bag and with William Harper. And she just, like I say, she just basically took me into the fold. And at some point there, you know, she was so sweet. She would invite me up to sing. I would sing at the lectern or the podium with Mother. She'd have me, you know, she'd just open up the songbook and go through some things and say, well, here, let's do this one, you know. And I was learning a few of them, and it was really sweet to be there, just standing up there with Mother. And so this song I wrote on my way down to Atlanta in the car. I was traveling with another fella, and so I went up to her room and played it for her, and I got my very first teaching on what can happen musically if you're not doing the right thing. And there was a particular line of that song that I just sang for you that she said, that's got a little curlicue on it, that note there, is a little curlicue. And she said that, can you hold that note, can you just sustain that note and not give it that little curlicue? And so I said, well, sure, you know. So I gave it a try, and she said, that's great. It has about 9 times as much power now, Terry, as it did before. And so here I was getting these wonderful teachings from Mother at this very early stage in my cheliship. And come to find out, it was the beginning of a long line of important musical teachings for me, because being a musician, having been doing this all my life, it was important for me to contemplate the fact that I may not want to do certain things anymore. I may not want to see what that curlicue was a human vibration. The difference between the human and the divine is something that you learn as you go along this path of cheliship, and you just don't know the difference between them. But once you get on the path for a little while, you can spot them. What I'd like to do is I'd like to show you what that little curlicue looked like and sounded like as an example of what I was singing for Mother and what she corrected me on. I think it went something like this. I and my Father are one. I and my Mother are one. Twin flames within, so I can begin to show I and my Father are one. See, and my wife and I, we sit and joke about this at the restaurant. We go out to the restaurants and we're hearing the overhead music, and we're hearing these people going every which way but straight, and it's gotten out of whack. It's it's like a wheel that's out of alignment, and it's just about ready to come off. So that's an example of kind of what I did. I would write my music as I was driving up and down the road, and that's how I wrote I Shook Lanello's Hand. And the first time I ever sang that for her, as a matter of fact, was in South America. We were on a bus, and she was sitting. I was sitting right behind the driver, and she was sitting just across the aisle there in that one of those front 2 seats that looks out onto the glass. And I'd gone back and got my guitar, and I said, Mother, I've got this song about Mark that I wrote, Lanello or Mark, I forget what I said. She said, well, let me hear it. So I sat on the edge of the seat there and sang it, and she didn't say anything other than just, she said, play it again. And so I did. I just played it again, and it was a very sweet moment. The songs that I've written for the Masters and for the Brotherhood, I've given them, you know, the right to publish them. But I'm telling you, there was a test that went with that too, because I was flying into Santa Barbara from Jacksonville, Florida, once to record this 45 that we were going to put together. We're going to have the Lanello song on one side and this song I wrote about Mother Mary on the other side, and so Mother asked me. She asked me very specifically about my copyright. Would I be willing to give up the copyrights to these songs? So there was another first initiation on surrender. And I did. And I'm so glad that I did, because it was another step on the path. And these things came from God, and they must be shared by the people who hold the pearls for God and be given to the world. And I knew that I'd have all that I needed after that. A song that I wrote when I was out on the road was, I actually wrote it about, well, I'll play you a little bit of it. I'm not going to play it all the way through. And then I'll tell you about it. My brother asked me who Saint Germain was. My brother asked me who Saint Germain was. I thought and I wondered how I could explain what wonder was held in Saint Germain's name. He's helping to bring forth the teachings of God. He's helping to bring forth the teachings of God, aligned with our dear Master Jesus Christ and His Mother Mary. In these three I trust. And there's more to that. There's more to that. As a matter of fact, those are 2 out of 6 verses. Actually, I have a brother in my worldly family who's very spiritual. As a matter of fact, he's the first one in our whole family to have gone. How do you want to say it? To have gotten spiritual, above board, and wasn't afraid to talk about his belief in Jesus and read the Bible and talk about it and one thing and another. You know, and so many of us have those things going on, but it's under the surface. And he was the first one to come out with that on the surface. And I was visiting him back in Connecticut, and so bless his heart, he said, "Now Terry, who is this Saint Germain fellow that you talk about?" You know, and it was very, very sweet, because he's just one of the dearest people, and you know, it's a real honor to be in a family with this soul. And so I did my best to explain who Saint Germain was. And so then what I did, folks, was I wrote my feelings down in that song. So those are the things that I was thinking about at that time. I have a very sweet story to tell too about about this song that I recorded in Nashville. When I met Mark, one of the things I did was I gave him a copy. I gave him a 45 of this record called Mama Bear, and I gave him an 8x10 glossy, and you know, I signed it to Mark, you know, Terry Kennedy, you know, here you go, you know, here's my stuff, you know, and I was so proud of it, you know. Of course, you know, it's natural. And this song actually went on to become #1 in major markets around the country. It was #1 for 3 weeks in Denver, and 3 weeks in Kansas City, 3 weeks in Des Moines, Iowa, and got up in the top 10 in Cincinnati, and it was getting airplay all across the country. So it was doing fairly well. So Mark actually, as I heard later, took the record and took it upstairs over the Four Winds, where they had a chapel up there, and they'd have the decrees going, and I guess, and whatever, and he played it for the staff. And I heard about that later, and I thought, well, isn't that sweet? I don't know whether I'd want the staff to hear that or not, but but Mark wanted them to hear it. See, here's this guy, Terry Kennedy, who's a friend of ours, you know. So he was getting them used to me and one thing and another, and I thought it was really sweet to hear about later on. But to skip ahead just a little bit here, we were down in South America. Mother had asked me if I wanted to join the church crew and the group that was going to South America. There were 50 or 60 students of the Masters that were going to go all over. What we did was we went through 6 countries in 16 days. We flew out of Miami, Florida, and we ended up in Mexico City for this last half of December of 1973. And Mother asked me if I wanted to go, and I said, hey, I said, I normally spend Christmas with my family, but this is my new family, so it makes sense, you know. So I went on the trip, and at one point we traveled every which way we could. We went by bus and airplane, car, train, and so at this one point we were supposed to have, for our little church group, 2 train cars to travel in between point A and B, and I don't remember where we were going and where we'd been, but we only had one train car. I think it was a 12-hour trip or something like that. It was extremely long. We all got crammed into one car. So I end up sitting on my suitcase right next to Mother. She's in this little booth area here. And so we've been going along, and you know, you know how you do. You just kind of talk out all the subject matter. And at one point, so Mother, I had my guitar with me. Mother said, "Say, Terry, why don't you play that song for us that you recorded that was a #1 hit?" I said, "Oh, I don't know, Mother, whether you'd like to hear that or not." This thing called Mama Bear, and it was cute. It was all right. It was nice for the world, you know, but I don't know whether. She said, "No, I'd like to hear it." And I said, "Yeah, but it's I don't know, Mother. It's kind of a worldly song, you know. It's not really a church song." She said, "Terry, play the song." So, I mean, how can you not play the song when Mother says, "Terry, play the song"? So I said, "Okay." This is how much I sang. I know Goldilocks is just a children's story. Fairy tales, they never do come true. But I found footprints on my windowsill this morning, and Goldilocks don't wear that big a shoe. Mother said, "That's enough, Terry. Thank you very much." Right after the Atlanta class, we flew up to, Mother actually flew up to Washington, D.C. because the masters asked her to go to Washington, D.C. And there was a lady that had a home that was kind of the focus there. So I was given the opportunity to ride up there in Mother's gold bus, which was this beautiful bus that Mark had built for Mother. And so I went up in the bus with some of the staff, and Mother flew up, and we stayed there at this lady's home. And I was sleeping in my sleeping bag on the front room floor there, and all of a sudden, Mother, we were all about to go to sleep, and Mother came traipsing down the stairs, you know, like a little teenager, and she said, "Terry, when's your birthday?" So I said, "Well, it's January 24th, 1941. "Okay, thanks." Back up the stairs, you know, and I didn't know why, but later on I figured, well, she's probably making some heavy calls for me. When we were down in South America, we'd walked up on top of this pyramid where John Fox is carrying his accordion. He's got this huge, heavy accordion, and some of these pyramid steps are like, you know, like this, you know. And I don't know whether the camera could see that necessarily, but it's like, you know, 6 inches this way and about 2 feet high. And so I actually carried his accordion, I think, up this one, and he took my guitar just to give him a break. But there were a lot of, usually there were a lot of negative records that were held in these places for various reasons. And so we went up there, we sang songs, and then Mother made calls and whatever. And so when we came down, we got back on the bus, and Mother was sitting in the chair right behind the driver, and I was sitting next to her. And I'm just kind of chit-chatting with her, you know, and making light conversation. And Mother turns to me and she says, "Terry, would you please be quiet? Lanello's giving me the name of some black magicians." And and I said, "Oh, sure, yeah, I guess I will." And so, but you know, she knew I could handle it. I don't know what I would have done on this path of initiation had it not been for Mother. You know, she took over when Mark ascended, and she was always, in my estimation, the strongest soldier on the planet. And from time to time, I would try to compliment her when I was up at the lectern or on a microphone or at the podium or whatever. She didn't want to hear any of it. I remember once when I tried that, she invited me to sing at the main altar of the Holy Grail at Camelot before they dismantled the altar. She called me on the phone down at the print shop where I was working and asked me if I'd come out and sing my songs before they took the altar down. And what a grand opportunity. And in particular, that time I was referring to her as one of the most stalwart soldiers on the planet, and she just, "Oh, be quiet, you know, just sing your songs, Terry." Well, that's the way she was, you know. She was one of the ranks. And there's so many things that are unpleasant that are said about the messengers. I don't understand it myself. Personally, I don't understand it because to my way of thinking, the initiations that come to a soul on this path are impersonal. Now there's the personal personality, there's the personal impersonality, and the impersonal impersonality, and the impersonal personality, if you know what I'm talking about. You go around the clock and you position yourselves at these 4 quadrants, and there are these different vibrations of initiations. But it's for the Chela to figure out where the initiation is, you know, and I figured that anything that rolled through Mother, I don't care what it was, anything that rolled through Mother and came to my doorstep was my initiation. Because every initiation is a dual initiation. If it's part hers and part mine, well, that's fine. But what can I learn from it, see? And so I loved her through all of these. I'll never forget, I was just fresh on the path, and we'd just gotten back from Washington, D.C. I flew back with Mother and Randall and Tatiana, and we had a service over at La Tourelle. And I was, well, being a nightclub entertainer and Mr. Laugh It Up sort of a guy, you know, always kind of making light of things, you know, and I'll never forget, Mother chastised me afterwards, after the service was over, and told me how inappropriate my comments were. And I thought later on, good for her, you know, good for her. Look what she did. Look how much good she did for my soul to, you know, to let me know that that's inappropriate. And she was never one to just rubber stamp whoever you thought you were. She was going right for who you really were. And for that, I am eternally grateful, and I consider it a major honor to be considered a friend of Mother and Mark's. Most of everything that I am and I was on the path of initiation has to do with music. I've been playing music since I was 15 years old. My mother co-signed for my first little guitar, and I got hooked up with a music teacher, and then I had a paper out, and I spent all my paper out bond money after 2 years and bought another electric guitar, which is quite a classic to this day. But my whole life has been music. And so it's obviously what I came to do, and it's kind of like my dharma. And the difference between the dharma and the sacred labor is, you know, you go to work over here, you do your sacred labor, and then you create your music for your dharma. And so that's where I am in my life right now. I want to make sure that everything that I've written for the Brotherhood and for the Masters and for the world is now down on tape and on CD, because it's my testimony to the path of initiation. As things happen in the world, here we are, we're just in the wake of this terrible tragedy in New York, and as I sit and co-measure with what's going on in the world, I think, my gosh, the world needs the teachings of the Ascended Masters in their many facets. They need this jewel, because it's such a multifaceted jewel, this pearl of wisdom of these teachings, is that little bits and pieces of just the smallest part can help a soul get through a major thing in life. And so my gratitude to Mother and Mark is going to be expressed through my music and through my poetry and the books that I'll write, memoirs and whatever. But so many of my memories with Mother and Mark are actually tied to the music. What I'd like to do, I'd kind of like to end my little discourse for you dear hearts on this videotape with a story of how I happened to write the song about Mother Mary, the Virgin of Guadalupe. Our South America trip had ended up in Mexico City. A lot of the staff had come down from Colorado Springs in these big school buses, and so they met us there, and we had this conference in December of '73. And one of the things that was scheduled was to go over to the shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And so just before we went, we were read the story of Mother Mary's appearance to Juan Diego in the year 1531. And it was such a sweet, sweet story. I was so impressed. And then Mother Mary gave a dictation. And at the end of this dictation, I remember she said, "I love you." And I used those words in the song because that was what she had said to us in that dictation. So we went to the shrine, and we were actually given the opportunity to sit on the altar side very, very close to the tilma. And here's this tilma that I won't go into any detail now, but here's this tilma that it was made out of cactus fiber that's supposed to disintegrate within 3 years, and it's been hanging there at the altar since the year 1531. Pretty amazing. So we're in the radiation of Mother Mary, and Mother Mary gave me a song. My humble little Midwestern style on this guitar, and my country western roots. I guess you'd call them country, maybe middle of the road. I don't know. She deposited this song on my heart, and I worked on it that evening in the hotel. I was rooming with Kenneth McNeil, and I said, Kenneth, I've got to go into the bathroom now to finish this song, and so he always kind of jokes about that. But I did. I went in there and I kind of finished it. And the following day, we were over in the Yucatan, and I went into Mother's quarters and asked her if I could play this song for her. And there were some changes that were made, but basically, this is what Mother Mary gave to me, and it's what I want to give to the world. And what I want to give to the world more than anything is my testimony to the reality of the Christ in Mark Prophet and Elizabeth Clare Prophet. Because when Jesus was asking his disciples if they knew who he was, some of them did not know, and some of them did. And I, for one, my friends, am one that does know that the Christ in Mark Prophet and Elizabeth Clare Prophet is what has saved this planet and is taking us from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age by God's grace. I witnessed the love radiating from Mary. I stood before the Virgin of Guadalupe. Oh, how she told me she'd waited so long for me to see her and take forth my song. Mother Mary told me to be sure to tell you the time has come for her to appear to the eyes of children, all of so much worth, across the face of our dear Mother Earth. Ave Maria, I love you too. Mother Mary told me I love you. From the holy ground where she appeared to Juan Diego, I take this song to sing, and onward I go to tell the people she'll be coming soon, clothed with the sun, under her feet the moon. Ave Maria, I love you too. Mother Mary told me I love you. One thing she told me is that her love is meant to all under God's law. Here's how to call her, and with her you can be. Call Mother Mary to gain your victory. Ave Maria, I love you too. Mother Mary told me I love you. One thing she told me is that her love is meant to flow to all under God's law. Here's how to call her, and with her you can be. Call Mother Mary to gain your victory. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sons and daughters of God, now and at the hour of our victory, over sin, disease, and death. Ave Maria, I love you too. Mother Mary told me I love you. Ave Maria, I love you too. Mother Mary told me